Bill, welcome back to InvestorStream. You've recently commenced fixed loop surveys at your Imbin project in the Earaheedy Basin. Can you just talk us through the strategy here and the areas that you're targeting?
Good morning, Alex. We've obviously been active recently with the EM surveys at Imbin Earaheedy. We're investigating areas which have had a significant amount of historical activity over them, and the areas which are closest to the main Goss and copper intersections of the early 1990s. Particularly interesting because we have existing geochemistry and geological information over those areas. So we see this as a first step in targeting the Earaheedy Imbin base metal potential. Initially from our airborne EM surveys of 2021, we've selected these three targets. They exist along strike and in the same geological sequence as the main Gossan target. They're particularly new targets. They haven't been drilled previously, but they do have supporting geochemical evidence, base metal anomalies associated with them, and also gold anomalies associated with them. So we see this as the first step. While we're waiting for the main phase of the airborne EM targeting to be completed, we see this as the first step of getting our drilling programs underway at Earaheedy. So they are along strike within probably 2 or 3 kilometres of the main Gossan occurrence, similar geological sequence, and as I said previously, geochemical anomalies associated with all of them, and they're accessible at the moment. So we just need to define the targets from the EM, get in there with a heritage survey, get clearance to do the drilling, and we'll proceed from there.
Thanks, Bill. Now, the Earaheedy Basin has long been regarded as a lucrative province, with Rumble Resources and BPM Minerals both experiencing recent success nearby. It's been over a year since you first set foot on the ground at Imbin. With all the exploration work you've completed to date, how confident are you that the geology here stacks up to those other projects around the Earaheedy?
Since we acquired the ground, we've always been interested in the base metal potential of Earaheedy, and I think the most recent developments have demonstrated that it's a metal-rich province. That's the first thing. So I think the work that's being done elsewhere is demonstrating that there's potential for significant mineralization and sort of world-class style of ore bodies in that basin sequence. We also recognize that the age of the rock sequence we're exploring is similar to the age of the mineralizing events along the northern margin of the Proterozoic there, which includes the Briar Basin, of course, the Degussa copper discovery. And the work we're doing now is really aimed we're acquiring extensive geochemical data across the 30-odd EM targets that we've identified there. But they will, ultimately corroborate this interpretation. And we see the geology as being particularly interesting, not just locally in terms of the other activity in the basin, but also in comparison to the Briar Basin, which is obviously a VMS type province. And the presence of mafic rocks, I think, is particularly important as well. There have really been no recognition of the mafic rocks in the sequence that we're exploring up until now. And I see that as being particularly significant in the style of mineralization that we're also looking for in terms of the copper potential. So in general terms, the belief, the potential of that sequence has not changed at all since we first acquired the tenements, other than that we are now seeing that it's a very metal-rich basin, and that's sort of corroborating our interpretation as well.
Thanks, Bill. Now, across the company's portfolio, there's plenty of activity with drilling at the Neds Creek Gold JV and the Jubilee Well Gold Project, both expected before the end of the quarter. Now, I understand you raised almost $3 million back in February. 6 months on, how is the company positioned financially to accelerate these initiatives?
We're well positioned to follow up on the targets we've identified so far. As we said earlier, the 3 targets we're initially chasing at Earaheedy Imbin, and the targets at Jubilee Well and Neds Creek, which are basically available to drill anytime now, we're well placed to carry through with that. In addition to identifying the other targets in the Earaheedy, which is an ongoing process, I see that process taking several weeks, if not a couple of months, to identify the full range of targets at the Imbin Earaheedy. So in a nutshell, we've got about 1.9 million cash. That's more than enough to fund us through the first phase of drilling at Neds Creek and at Jubilee Well, in addition to the drilling at Imbin. And we'll follow through into the follow-up work we need to do at Imbin Earaheedy on the basis of the geochem work that we've just completed. So I see us well funded for the immediate future in terms of the drilling requirements in the next 6 months.
And Bill, finally, from an operational standpoint, we mentioned plenty of progress happening across the portfolio. What does the next 6 months look like for Lodestar?
Well, I think it marks the beginning of the pointy end of the exploration program, certainly commencement of drilling at Neds Creek and Jubilee Well, and as I said earlier, Imbin Earaheedy. So those 3 programs, I think, will be getting underway relatively quickly, say by the end of the quarter. In addition, we've got to roll out the interpretation of all the geochem work we've done at Imbin Earaheedy, which is around about 2,000 odd samples we've collected there now. That those samples have now gone into the laboratory. They're being processed, so anticipate about 5 weeks turnaround for those. And on top of that, the work that CSIRO will contribute to identifying and prioritizing the targets from that program will be particularly important, given that we're looking at a sort of frontier exploration terrain. That may take some time, but nonetheless, it's work that has to be done to thoroughly evaluate the work we've done to date. So I see, obviously, in the immediate term and near term, the drilling at Contessa and Edge Creek, at Jubilee Well, and at Earaheedy. Beyond that, I see the geochem results coming in from the Earaheedy and identifying the remaining targets from those 30 odd conductors we identified last year. And then there'll be fixed loop to do over those, and then followed up by drilling programs. So I think we'll get a significant number of targets will evolve from that work. And in addition to that, we've got Nepean, which is the scoping study is ongoing. The upgraded 2012 resource is due for the shallow mineralization at Nepean. And also we'll be looking at the lithium, the gold regional targets, which have been identified and awaiting drilling approvals. And we've got Coolgardie West as well, which we expect the tenement to be granted towards the end of October. And we expect to be able to get out there on the ground with a drilling program almost immediately once that tenement is granted, to follow up the gold and lithium targets identified there as well earlier in the year. So the last few months of the year are going to be quite active in terms of generating targets, and also the initiation of our first drilling programs over at least 3 of those projects. And then following on from that, the work that's at Earaheedy, which will identify, probably, I imagine, multiple targets from the EM and geochem work we've done there.
Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate you joining me today, and all the best for what is a very busy period for the company.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.